Yes, he wants a lot of money, and he can only get that by killing the Baudelaire children. But he also really wants to be a respected actor. And that's such a strange combination of traits.
As a theater person, that's not that strange of a combination.
Rusty Quill presents Enthusiasm. Hello, friends and fans, and welcome to Enthusiasm. This is our show where we talk about a few of our favourite things. I am your host, Helen Gould, one of the best Rusty Quillers, and today we're talking about my absolute favourite damn subject, and it's villains, the hot, evil ones. Excellent, woo, and I am excited and delighted to be joined by Cathy, Gabriel, Hannah, and Lex. We will, as always, go around alphabetically. So, Cathy, can you give us your pronouns and tell us what you do?
Hi, I'm Cathy. I am she, her, and I am audio master at Rusty Quill.
Wonderful. And next up, Gabriel.
Hi, I am Gabriel, he, him, and I am tech support assistant at Rusty Quill.
Fab. Hannah, you're next.
Hello, I am Hannah P. I am one of the producers for Rusty Quill. I work on Rusty Quill Gaming and our Patreon. And pronouns she, her.
And last but absolutely not least, Lex, please do introduce yourself. What are your pronouns and what do you do?
I'm Lex, he, him. I made the Decca tapes and I'm currently working on my first novel.
Ooh, exciting. What's it about?
It's about a non-existent Soviet state where people are fighting a war of fake news.
Oh,
Ooh, that's intense.
We wouldn't know anything about that, would we?
Yes.
No, not at all.
Ooh, close to the bone.
Everyone laughs nervously. Not pulled out of reality at all.
Well, good luck with it. I hope that goes well. Okay, we're going to jump in with our first question, which is basically, why are villains interesting? I think my thoughts on it are, I find villains interesting because I always have a morbid curiosity for why bad stuff happens. Because, I mean, I think of myself as a good person. I don't think I would ever turn into a serial killer or anything like that. And so figuring out why other people might do that is interesting to me because it's something I cannot imagine doing.
That's just what a serial killer would say.
A serial killer would definitely say, I am not a serial killer, except for the ones who do say that.
Yeah. I knew Helen was the one to look out for. I knew it.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of true crime, know a lot of horrible things. Does anyone else want to give me their take on why you're interested in villains?
This is going to sound weird, but maybe it'll be kinship to what Helen said. Find them kind of relatable. In the sense that, especially a lot of like modern day villains, there's this pattern of having a backstory that led them to where they are now. And it's usually something that we can all see ourselves in. But it's just something, whether it was events or a way of life that just kind of turned things in a different direction that led them down this path. I think it's kind of like what you said, Helen. You kind of see yourself in like, well, if I had done X, Y, and Z and followed that path, I wonder how things would have gone out.
Yeah, I would say a good hero is someone you would hope to be, and a good villain is someone you're afraid to become, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, that's a good way of putting it, Lex. Yeah.
Good line.
So both sides should be really relatable. And of course, once you became that person you were afraid of becoming, you're going to make the best of it and become a charismatic version of that fear, right? So you should have fun with it.
I wonder if there's also something about how heroes are often presented as making the difficult choice over and over again, because doing the right thing and the good thing is often much more difficult. And so being a hero feels less attainable.
Right.
And less relatable.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen Unbreakable with Bruce Willis?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So I'm going to have to spoil stuff to make my point.
Go for it.
Do your worst, Lex.
Yeah, but I love how in that movie, basically, the villain is someone looking for meaning. And by doing that, he needs Bruce Willis. And in that way, he gives meaning to Bruce Willis's life. I'm calling him Bruce Willis because I don't remember what the character's name is.
Oh my God, I also don't remember.
Is it David?
His character's Bruce Willis, let's be real.
His character is always Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
But basically, they're both like trying to project meaning, right? And I thought it was such a genius plot.
Yeah, I think some of the best heroes versus villains are when they is essentially the same person, but just they took some crucial different decisions.
Yeah.
Gabriel, what do you think? What interests you about villains?
I do agree with what's been said in that, I mean, there are kind of two paths, right? There's the villains that you relate to, that it's just, are the one bad day kind of villains that you can really see yourself like I could maybe snap one day and go down that path. But then there's also the flip side. And those are the ones that are a little bit more fascinating to me personally, because it's just like, you look at this person and what they're doing and they're just, enjoying whatever horrible acts they're committing. And it's like, I will never, and my brain will, 100% never work like that person's. And that is absolutely fascinating to me.
So that's where we're talking about like sort of something that you cannot comprehend.
Right.
Like say, what's he called from Halloween? Jason Voorhees.
Jason's from Friday. So Michael Myers from Halloween.
Oh, Michael Myers.
Yeah.
I get them mixed up all the time. Halloween and Friday the 13th are like the same thing in my head, and I don't know why.
But yeah, Michael Myers is a good example of just like an evil that you just can't understand, and that makes him scarier, I think.
And he doesn't stop.
Right.
And I think that's the scariest thing, yeah. Hannah, what about you? What do you think?
Well, you guys have definitely touched on some of my answers for sure. The, there but for the grace of God go I kind of a deal is always fascinating to think about, as well as the things that are just morbid fascination of like, I can't fathom how this would happen, but I must look and understand it. I also think it's interesting that both heroes and villains, at least the good ones, have like a cause. They have a reason that they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of the best villains sort of see themselves as the good guys. I think that got mentioned as well. And it's very interesting to examine it from that perspective and think about like, if I were in that situation, would I also see myself as the good guy and view, the hero as the villain, basically. Yeah. So, yeah, perspectives and motivations, that's one of the best places to examine them is in our lovely, and as Helen said, oftentimes rather attractive and charismatic antagonists. Because, damn it, it's true.
Let's talk about our favourite villains.
Ooh, okay.
You can choose more than one because there are lots of different characteristics that make up a good villain, which is something that maybe we'll talk about later. I would love to hear from some of you about that.
Well, first would be Alex.
Oh, our Alex.
Wait a minute.
I have heard enough Rusty Quill Gaming episodes now that I can see where Alex being a villain has become a regular thing.
But we respect his craft, Cathy.
And I appreciate that. It's one of my favorites. I respect it. I admire it. I think he's misunderstood.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really great.
The true big bad was Alex Newell all along.
And maybe this is just the part of me that loves musicals speaking up. Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog.
Yeah.
Dr. Horrible himself. Just such a wonderfully unique and quirky character. And I love the fact that you can see everything that he goes through from his perspective. It's perfectly logical, but just with that tweak of, well, all of this is wrong, so I just have to fix it because nobody else is. And then we get musical numbers thrown in, and we get Nathan Fillion thrown in, and we get, all these wonderful extras on top of
Yeet
it.
Nathan Fillion.
Yeah, he's a really interesting one because, he's a villain, but he is the hero of that story, and we root for him the majority of the time, and which, makes the transformation at the end all the more bittersweet,
right.
As it were.
We saw the villain, spoilers, we saw the villain succeed.
Right.
And it's not what anybody, including the viewer, actually ended up wanting.
Right.
But we got it anyways.
Yep.
I haven't seen Dr. Horrible's sing-along thing, but
Oh my God.
for a very long time.
Okay.
Should we just like pause the episode and just give a quick watch?
All right, stop everything.
I've forgotten everything that happens in it.
I'm going to one up you and say that I have no idea what you guys are talking about right now.
Oh, okay.
no.
Let's explain. Let's explain to Lex.
So back when, do you remember the writer's strike in the US?
Yeah, of course.
So back that time, since there were nothing but like reruns going on cable TV, and the idea of internet content still hadn't quite taken off as a full viable medium, Joss Whedon got together with a few actors and close friends, and they wrote a musical that was made just for internet viewing, just for streaming and YouTube. And it took off. It took off in a big way, and it became a proof that that kind of medium could work in the entertainment space. So it's basically about this guy who calls himself Dr. Horrible. He wants to essentially take over the world because he wants to fix it. He sees a lot wrong with the world, a lot of people being mistreated. He sees heroes not being heroic, but rather using their machismo to kind of do things to their own advantage and take advantage of their position. And so he keeps trying to foil the plans of the heroes and trying to create chaos and anarchy, and keeps getting thwarted by the local hero, who is Captain Hammer.
Captain Hammer.
And you follow through this short little storyline of like, you see him both in his villain persona of making a blog online, trying to talk to his fans, like, this is what I'm going to do next, and this is how I get admitted to the
Evil League of Evil.
Thank you. The Evil League of Evil. And at the same time, you also get cuts of his day-to-day where he's infatuated with this girl who's doing so much good in the community, but ends up falling in with the hero and his internal struggle.
And you said this is a musical?
It is.
Yes.
It's a musical.
Yeah, it's a musical.
It's a 5-episode musical, and there's songs all over it. It's wonderful.
Okay.
It's an experience. Would recommend.
Definitely checking this out.
What you mentioned that brought to mind is Count Olaf from the unfortunate series of...
Oh, yes.
Series of unfortunate events. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
I think because What's-His-Face plays Count Olaf in one of the versions of that as well. I'm so sorry. We're just forgetting people's names all over the place. What's his name?
Neil Patrick Harris.
Yes, that guy. He's a very good Count Olaf. But Count Olaf is like one of the quintessential villains for like children's fiction.
Because he does this?
Yes.
Does the villain fingers.
For the audience, we all simultaneously did the hand rubbing thing that villains do when a plan is going to very well. What's interesting to me, I think, about him is that, yes, he wants a lot of money, and he can only get that by killing the Baudelaire children. But he also really wants to be a respected actor. And that's such a strange combination of traits.
That's not that... As a theater person, that's not that strange of a combination.
No, that's pretty typical, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully we wouldn't try and murder children to do
No. I kid. Probably.
Yeah, and that's a good example to bring up, because that's probably like one of the first villains that this generation was exposed to. I know it was one of my first real series that I went through.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember he was pretty terrifying.
Yeah. He's what I would class one of those ones who I can on a very base level, I understand the thought, I would like some money, please.
We all been there.
I don't understand anything else about him. And like the other thing is, like, he has such elaborate schemes. It's ludicrous, the stuff he comes up with. Gabriel, who's your favorite?
I have been trying to think, and I think I've actually narrowed it down to two.
Oh, yeah?
I think for sympathetic villains, speaking of antagonists that a lot of people start off with and that I certainly grew up watching, Prince Zuko from Avatar.
Ooh.
I wondered if we were going to talk about Zuko.
Very good.
Yeah, he is easily one of my favorite. I don't even know if I can call him a villain, but definitely antagonist.
I think he's a villain at the start, and he's just a villain who gets a redemption arc.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I'm a sucker for villains turned friends. And that's probably the quintessential bad guy to good guy story in my mind. However, on the other end of the spectrum, one of my favorite villains that has come out in the past decade, I would say, I don't know if you guys have watched the Marvel Netflix series at all, Kilgrave from the Jessica Jones series.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about him. David Tennant, right?
It's David Tennant, and it's uncomfortable David Tennant. Yeah.
I love it when David Tennant is uncomfortable.
Yeah. Those are my. I would say that those are my current two favorite on either end of the redemption spectrum.
Yeah, David Tennant plays an excellent villain. Honestly,
yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. I went from watching a Doctor Who for the first time to watching that, and it was
what a total whiplash! Oh my god!
Yeah.
Wow.
Lex, what about you? Do you have a fave?
Yeah, so we talked about Unbreakable earlier. I love Mr. Glass. I like picking one is so hard, but one of my favorite scenes ever is the opening scene from Inglourious Bastards, where Hans Landa does like the ultimate cat playing with his food scene. I don't know how long it actually is, but it feels like a movie. It feels like an hour goes by before everything goes down.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so... And the thing with that movie is that it's a brilliant movie, but the opening scene is so brilliant. Like, for me, it never gets back to that point after that.
Yeah.
Because
right.
The tension is just... I saw it in the cinema, and a week later, I just went again just to see that part again, Yeah, but to me, nothing gets close to that opening scene.
Yeah, that's fair.
With the huge, he smokes this huge pipe.
Yeah, it's
like
massive.
Everything's so odd.
It's so ridiculous.
It's such a villain pipe. It's great.
But it gets ridiculous every time you think, okay, now it's about to get dark, and then something ridiculous, like he pours some more milk. Something ridiculous happens, which makes it even more dark.
And somehow it makes it, makes it scarier somehow.
Yeah. I seem to remember that with the pipe thing, it's because the guy who's hiding Shoshana and her family pulls out a pipe, and then Hans Landa pulls out a bigger pipe. That's what happens.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, that's a real good choice.
And I love how they change languages at some point, and he says it's because it's easier for him, but then it turns out it's actually because he doesn't want the people beneath the floorboards to understand what he's saying, which is just, it's so simple, but so,
very, very creepy.
That's the stuff that gives me panic attacks when I'm trying to write a scene, that someone wrote that scene, But what am I supposed to do now? When we were talking about villains with no morale or that are just impenetrable, it made me think of the artificial intelligence in Space Odyssey.
Oh,
I think it's called Hal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do that, Dave.
I think it's called Hal and then a number like 6,000 or something.
HAL 9000, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and it's just this ominous red dot. And from the beginning, you just feel like with Hal, they won't be friends for long. But it just works because the voice is so soothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And right up to the point where he's like pulling out the mainframes or whatever to make it stop, it's still scary because it's so abstract, right? And there's such there's no human connection at all, and it makes it really scary. So I guess that's like the ultimate like non-relatable villain kind of.
Right, just entirely like unfeeling.
Yeah, unfeeling. Yeah, that's a nice
Pure
word.
logic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does not care. Like,
yeah, it's almost like an insect, right? It's just listening to its programming, and
Lex, have you Have you played Portal?
I was just about to.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
I was actually, my brother got kind of upset with me 2 weeks ago that I hadn't played it yet. So I've literally installed it 3 days ago. So don't spoil it. Don't spoil it.
No. No.
I think it's obvious from the beginning, isn't it?
Well, Portal 1 or Portal 2?
I'm starting with 1.
Portal 1, it's pretty obvious from the beginning.
Portal 1, it's pretty obvious, and it's good to start with 1. And then Portal 2 is a little more involved. But
yeah, there's more nuance to Portal 2.
I love Portal 2.
Yeah, you'll have fun. You'll have fun with those.
Great.
Yeah.
So much to do.
Yeah, keep an ear out.
Okay.
Just because when you said about the calming voice, I thought, I know a
know who
robot that does not sound.
Hooray.
Hannah, who's your favourite?
Ooh, well, I think I'm gonna have to be a total nerd and go for some old material.
Ooh.
Do it. Shakespeare, Richard III.
Interesting. Okay.
Just like the opening monologue is he's the main character, but he is clearly such a villain. And his opening monologue is basically, here's why I'm such a villain and I'm going to do terrible things. And he proceeds to just do a bunch of terrible things. But you still kind of root for him because he's just so good at talking. And like, he's not even, it's interesting playing with the hot villain trope because he's like physically deformed and everyone goes around saying like, oh, you're just such a like miserable. I hate looking at you, blah, 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 blah. But he's really good at talking and he's really charismatic. And when you see good portrayals of this character, like, the audience is absolutely on his side. And then he goes and like has children murdered just purely because he wants to get power. And it just messes with your head. So I gotta put that one out there. And then, of course, both the modern interpretation and the original interpretation, we need to talk about Loki because it's gotta happen eventually.
Yes, tell me about Loki, Hannah.
Oh gosh, I'll tell you about Loki, Helen.
Settle in, everybody.
Yeah. So this is very interesting to me because the modern, like, Marvel interpretation of Loki, clearly, especially with the new series, very much the sympathetic villain, like, here's why he's doing what he's doing, and don't you just kind of feel bad for him, and doesn't it all make sense? And they do a pretty good job of that, I think. In, like, the original mythology from, thousands of years ago, Iceland or whatever, it's so much more in the other direction. And this could just be because, like, we don't have a lot of source material to draw from. So there's a lot we don't know about this character. But it really just seems like he just shows up and decides to wreck shit, and then he does. And there's never a reason. It's just that he was bored. And then, like, the world almost ends. But he also oftentimes is the one who fixes the problem after he has caused it. So that's interesting. And yeah, it's really fun to me that, first of all, that this character is like still being talked about and well loved that many years later. I always think that's cool. But yeah, the different variations that exist now of the original version, which is so just chaotic and random and no one really knows why he's doing anything, to the modern version, which has this whole big emotional backstory and you feel bad for him. And yeah, it's one of my favorites for sure.
Does anyone else want to talk about Loki?
I am not very well versed in Marvel in general.
Me neither, I'm afraid.
That's fair.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually have not watched that series yet, and I feel so ashamed.
That's okay. Hannah, I understand.
Thank you, Helen. I appreciate that.
I think that the Marvel Loki is... I think he has has a very interesting character arc. I think that the Loki TV series, I have really mixed feelings about it in terms of how believable it seems to me that the Loki of the first Avengers film would go on to do everything that the Loki in the TV show does, because I feel like it would take more than what he goes through to change him that much.
That was my sort of one hang up on that as well, that I had to suspend my disbelief about, is like, I feel like it'd take more than, a couple of hours basically to have that drastic of a change, but okay. All right.
Yes. We'll have to move on from that, because my instinct was then to start talking about the other villains of the Loki TV show, because Loki is not the villain in that show.
Yeah.
but not everyone has seen it, so.
Oh, that's interesting. He's the good guy.
Yep.
Theoretically.
Well, cool.
Yes. Mostly yes.
I feel like most people in that show are morally grey.
Yeah, that's just a very morally gray show.
Everyone is doing what they think is best. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I think we're going to take a break there on our little discussion of Loki. And we'll be back in a minute with, I think we'll talk about the most villainous villain next. Hello, folks. Helen here to talk to you about a new show on the RQ network, The Milkman of St. Gaff's, which is a bi-weekly horror fiction podcast that combines odd humour and impending doom. And I know how much our fans like that. Howie Coxwell, a new milkman on the island of St. Gaff's, is the lovably naive narrator. He lied about his past in order to get the job, and to get away from the war on the mainland, but he's swiftly realising that he's going to be doing much more than delivering milk, because the milkmen on this island are also gathering intelligence on the strange things that lurk under the ground. To follow Howie's journey, search for the Milkman of St. Gaff's, that's GAFFS, wherever you get your podcasts. Happy listening. And welcome back. So before we talk about who we think is the most evil villain we've come across, since we've been talking about Loki and he's, a god, I would like to talk about the Devil, who I think is probably the most famous villain in Western society, and is sometimes referred to as the enemy.
Yeah, capital E.
Yes, because there have been lots and lots of different portrayals of the devil and of demons throughout the ages. I haven't seen Lucifer.
Me neither.
I have.
In that the devil is a guy sort of helping investigate crimes, I think.
Basically, yeah. He decides he's kind of done running hell and just goes to Los Angeles and has a nightclub and ends up becoming friends with this police detective who's investigating murders. And it's an interesting take on, the whole point of the devil being in hell is to punish people who do bad stuff.
Right.
That's what he's interested in doing. So he starts doing that on Earth by helping to track down murderers and stuff.
Yeah, there's been an interesting, surge of shows and movies that take the devil and make an almost endearing, relatable, kind of character, Lucifer, even anime, the devil is a part-timer.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one.
Or I don't think it has a specific devil, but just demons in general. Good Place, I would say, also falls in that category of just taking this historically ultra evil, the ultimate evil archetype and just somehow making it relatable. And it's I don't know, it's just been a really interesting trend lately that I've noticed.
The Good Place is interesting because it's quite explicitly not intended to be Christian theology,
right?
And yet it's pretty clear that there are demons.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be explicitly that, but I mean, there's some one-off jokes that are very clearly pointed.
Michael learning empathy is some of the best TV.
Yes.
Yep.
But to me, from the Middle Ages, the devil was always this invisible force, right? So, of course, once you get to hell, it's flames and demons and the whole shebang. But on Earth, his ways are hidden beneath symbolism and numerology, and that's the only way you can see his proverbial footprints. But he's basically, it's really easy to get in line on the wrong side. So I think that's why making him an approachable human figure is actually a modern pop culture way of doing exactly the same thing that mythology has always been doing. The scary thing about him is that he's the ultimate evil, but it's so easy to get really close to him or it or whatever you want to call it, right?
Right.
And that's what, at least to me, especially as when you're really young and you're learning, I haven't been raised religious or anything, but when you learn about these ideas, the scary thing is that you can't really, almost like HAL 9000, there's only this dot and you don't understand what's going on, but it's bad and you're not really sure how to avoid becoming bad also. And I think that's what makes him such a strong figure, as an enemy. How do you fight that, right? So you have to go inwards and not be sinful.
Yeah.
Which is, again, very complex. But that's why I really like what you said, Gabriel, like turning him into a relatable human kind of feels the same to me. You're like, oh, I want to go shake your hand. But I shouldn't, right? It's such a weird juxtaposition. But it makes the character so interesting because you never see his true face.
The notion of always having to be vigilant and you never know what, the big bad thing is going to look like. It could be anything. You could be you could already be doing terrible things and you don't even know is definitely, a scary aspect to the whole thing. And like you mentioned, like in the Middle Ages, it was just, everything everywhere was probably the devil somehow. And you gotta be super careful.
In a way, not only the evil incarnate idea, but also the misunderstood villain.
Oh, yeah.
From its origin story of Lucifer disagreeing with God or going against God and being cast out of heaven to land in hell. He did one thing wrong.
Right.
And now he's forever in charge of hell kind of thing. Like, I could see where some of that sympathy story that we have now in modern times kind of like bleeds out of that origin story.
But one of my favorite recent interpretations of the devil comes from The Witch.
Oh, yes.
Yes. One of my favorite films.
Yeah, and I think that interpretation very much goes along with what we're saying of like the devil is just like an ever-present, like just evil, just around, and it's always tempting you, and it's always like, it's interesting to say, like, a lot of the times, like Helen was saying with the original story of Adam and Eve, the thing that you're being tempted with isn't necessarily inherently evil, but in the case of the witch, it is. But it isn't just an interesting look about how villains, I think just to the psychology of villains, and that, it's wanting something more, it's wanting that chaos in the world. And I think in The Witch that interpretation of the devil is just a very good representation of that, just the chaos of temptation, I guess.
I mean, what Black Phillip says is, for those who haven't seen it, Black Phillip is a black goat in the film that turns out to have been...
Oh yeah, we should say that the interpretation of the devil in this movie is a goat.
It's a literal goat.
Yeah.
What he says to poor, what's her name? I do know her name.
I forget the character name, but it's Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah. What he says to her character after stripping everything away from her, like killing her entire family, what he says is, would you like to taste butter? Do you want a pretty dress? Wouldst thou like to live deliciously? And I was like, of course you say yes. Do we not all want to live deliciously
and eat butter?
Right, especially after all that. It's like what Lex was saying, like it's like what happens when all of you has been torn apart and broken down, like, and you're just, I
love that film so much. I could do an entire podcast about how much I love The Witch.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's such a good film.
Okay, so now I want to ask the question, who do you think is like the most villainous villain? Like, who is the villain that you've read or seen in media, and you think that's the most evil person or thing that I can think of? They don't have to be your favorite, but they have to be like I'm thinking of villains that are actually scary.
Yeah, for me personally, these aren't like supernatural villains. I personally don't find those scary, but the most like just like got under my skin villains, I have to go over to Game of Thrones.
Ooh.
And Joffrey, Baratheon, and Ramsay Snow.
Wow, yeah.
Very good.
Are two of the just like most despicable characters. Their actors play them so well, and I respect them for it, but oh man.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember Ramsay Snow's name today because we were talking about Game of Thrones, and I think I said he's the bastard with the sausage.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's not incorrect.
But that's the scene I remember most.
No, it's probably
Waggling
true.
the sausage. But yeah, those are really good picks, actually, Gabriel.
Because you forget, it's so well done that you forget that they're not actually those people.
I don't know how spoilery we should get on this, but when those two finally meet their, to their respective ends is probably the two most satisfying moments in that entire show.
Yes.
Because I think that's what, a good villain is really just leading up to a good villain death, right? Like... The point of a good villain is to look at a character and be like, I cannot wait to see you, like...
Yes, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and both of those characters for me, just really just like, ugh, I want to see you gone.
Yeah. The love to hate the villain, yeah.
Right.
I think... For me, one of the most evil villains I can think of is the mayor from Buffy.
Oh, that's a great one.
And I think that's specifically because he's so affable and so nice. And you can see how he could be a really nice, good person in another life. Like the way he treats Faith. Like he is the first, vaguely positive influence in Faith's life that she feels she can really trust, because she trusts Buffy and the others at first, and then she feels like they betray her.
Right.
And I think crucially, she feels like the mayor won't judge her. And that's very important for Faith at that time. I think that season 3 is one of my favorite seasons of Buffy purely because the mayor is in it. And the guy eats massive live spiders.
Yep.
He's determined. I think he's really up there for me for most evil / terrifying villain. Do we have any other takers?
I'll throw in another Buffy villain, actually.
Ooh.
Because what I want to answer is some vague statement about real life people doing terrible things, but I'm not going to go there. So in terms of fictional villains.
Yeah, let's try and talk about fictional stuff.
I'm going to throw in Glory from season 5, I think it is, because she is really not sympathetic. There's no backstory. She's just a force of evil, and she's completely, for a very long time, you just can't do anything about her.
Yeah, she's a god.
All of the other villains, at least if Buffy got close enough, she could punch him in the face, and they, stagger back, and it's okay, well, at least we can punch him in the face, but she just doesn't react. She just is oh, well, that was rude, and breaks her arm or something. And that was a scary moment to encounter after a whole show.
Yeah, because Buffy runs away from her, doesn't she?
Yeah, she gets her ass kicked by Glory over and over again. And then, of course, the whole spoilers. Of course, the whole plot line of oh, damn, she's basically trying to come after my sister, and I can't do anything to stop it. Just that inevitability is really striking to me.
Cathy, Lex, who do you think is the most evil villain you know of?
This last example made me think of, I don't know his full name. It's Anton something from No Country for Old Men.
Anton Sugar.
Yeah. So this completely, you couldn't gauge this guy, and wherever he went, people kind of were confused by him, and then he murdered them.
Oh.
That is one that I would also compare it to HAL 9000 in that, yeah, just unfeeling.
Yes, there's a pattern arising. You're being my therapist right now. We're getting closer to some kind of primal fear. Yeah, it's true. He also has this kind of insect quality where he just keeps going, and it's nobody can stop him for some reason. And he scared me.
Yeah, and he just doesn't see anyone. He just doesn't see people as people. They're all just a thing that's in the way.
Well put.
I think that's he uses specifically as a weapon the cattle gun.
Yes,
and I think that's extremely telling.
Yeah,
that he uses that as a reoccurring weapon.
Yeah, and he looks at people almost from a distance, right? He's a little bit confused, observing. What are you trying to do? Yeah.
It's almost like a person looking at an ant, the way that he looks at a person.
Yeah. I thought it was really well done.
Absolutely.
All right, Cathy, how about you?
Oh, I've been waiting because it's hard to think. I don't know if he's the most villainous villain, but if we go back to Gabriel's point of the villain you would love to see be rid of or die, whatever. I'm trying to remember the name of the priest in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Frollo!
Oh, yes.
Excellent choice.
Good answer. I mean, that is just the portrayal of pious yet pompous yet slimy, and you see it like continue to degrade throughout the movie. I remember watching the first time I watched it, I was surprised that it was a Disney movie because I didn't expect to see a villain that intense on the screen for an animated movie. But just seeing him warp throughout to the point where it's like he's this religious figure who basically looks like he's turning into the devil himself, you know, halfway through the movie. It's just, get rid of him. No, not good. No. None of that.
That is such a good choice. Frollo is absolutely terrifying, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we move on to the next question, I feel like we're going to get so many comments if we don't mention Gus from Breaking Bad in this little section here.
Ooh, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Because I don't see Gus as a villain. I see him as an antagonist to Walter White, who himself is becoming a villain.
I very much agree.
But he is very good. He's so smart.
And just extremely cold and calculated and just a very matter-of-fact villain.
Yeah.
And I like that. Yeah.
Yes. It's such a genius character.
It's just this is what's going to happen. Yeah.
Ooh, that's made me think of another one. Oh no, we could just keep doing this.
Yeah, we could. Yeah.
Okay, just to quick throw it in since we're talking about genius villains. Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes.
Oh yeah.
Versions of
all versions.
All
versions.
Yeah. I'm rewatching Elementary right now, and that's maybe my favorite.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
I'd also like to mention, not for being scary, just for being notable, Samuel Jackson's character from the first Kingsman movie, where he's evil. Like he's a villain who is trying to get control of the world, but he hates the sight of blood.
Yeah, his thing with blood throughout that movie is so funny.
It's so good.
So when he gets grossed out when he gets cut,
yeah.
Oh my god, it's
he
great.
shoots someone in the head and then he turns aside and throws up and he's like, oh, that was awful. I hated that. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
What about Hannibal Lecter?
Oh, Hannibal Lecter. Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Hannibal.
Oh, there's so many good ones, you guys.
There's too many good ones. This whole podcast is just us shouting characters.
It's just us yelling names. Yeah.
I think we're going to draw this episode to an end. I think this has been the one I've had the most fun on.
Yay, we win.
We win.
But don't tell the other episodes that. Thank you all so much for talking about this with me. I am always fascinated with antagonists, villains, monsters, scary, evil things, and I am glad to be able to share that fascination with you all. And thank you, listener, for coming with us along the journey. And we'll see you next time. But for now, it's goodbye from me, and it's also goodbye from them. Do you want to say goodbye, everyone?
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Enthusiasm is a podcast distributed by Rusty Quill and licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 4.0 international license. It is directed by Helen Gould, produced by Lowry Ann Davis, with executive producers Alexander J. Newell and April Sumner, and edited by Marissa Ewing, Tessa Vroom, Jeffrey Nils Gardner, and Catherine Ranella. Thanks for listening.